Well, good morning. It's good to be here with you. If you've got Bibles in front of you or if the electronic device, open it up to the book of John chapter 4. That's what we're going to be in today. As you know, we've been in the book of John for a few months. We jumped kind of to the middle, to the crucifixion scenes, then to the end last week. And this week, we're going all the way back to chapter 4. So we were in chapter 21 last week. We're giving you a little bit of whiplash. Chapter 4 this week. So where we left off as we were, I would say, linearly walking through the book of John was after the woman on the well. And the woman at the well. She wasn't on the well. She was at the well. Anyways, Jesus' famous interaction with this woman at the well. So what I thought I would do before we get into this story that happens right after that is to give us a little bit of a recap, because maybe some of you are new, since those last couple weeks, you weren't here for the beginning of that, or maybe it's just been a few weeks and we've kind of forgotten the first few chapters of the book of John. So the first chapter of the book of John is all about new creation. The Gospel of John starts his gospel with saying, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God. And then that Word has become flesh in Jesus. And so what he's doing is he's taking the creation narrative from Genesis chapter 1, and he's looking at Jesus, and he's saying, wow, this is a whole new beginning for the world. And so he writes that as a new beginning for the world. It's a new creation narrative. And then chapter 2 is a story where Jesus goes to Cana, and he turns water into wine. And it's sort of symbolic. Wine in the Old Testament, if you remember this from back when we talked about this, wine is symbolic of joy in the Old Testament. And so it's symbolic of Jesus bringing joy back to the world. Like this new creation, it has been subject to all these problems. The old creation has been subject to all these problems, and Jesus is bringing in this new creation. He's bringing in joy with him, and Jesus is transforming ordinary things into something spectacular. That's what chapter 2 is. And then he goes to the temple and he flips tables over. And it's basically this narrative of like, hey, the religious system that you're a part of is failing you, because really it's become about corruption and money and all this stuff. And what I really want is your hearts. And then chapter 3, that goes deep into theological conversation. A guy named Nicodemus, who we saw show back up when Jesus was getting buried, Nicodemus comes back, and traditionally Nicodemus is one who follows Jesus after his death and believes. But Jesus has this conversation with Nicodemus, the teacher of Israel, the smartest guy around. Like, he is the teacher of the teachers, and he doesn't get what Jesus is trying to say. But what Jesus is telling him is, look, a new creation is needed in your life. You have to be born again. I don't care how you are. I don't care the way you were born. I don't care whatever happened in your past. You've got to be born again. In other words, die to your old self and start a new life with me. This is the teaching of Jesus. And he's like, look, unless you do this, you can't really have a part of me. Like, you can't have a part of this. And then John writes the most spectacular Bible verse in all of John, and you know this because it's probably something you've seen on the back of cars, you've seen it on billboards, you've seen it everywhere. It's this text, John 3:16, and I like to include verse 17 in it too, because a lot of times people forget what verse 17 says. So let's read it. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. So the reason why I like to include verse 17 is sometimes as Christians we forget that our job isn't to go condemn the world, because we're really, really good at it, right? How many of you are like super good at judging people? Yeah. We're good at it. We know how to condemn people. But Jesus' mission is to come into the world to save it, not to condemn it. And oftentimes, we're like, oh, okay, Jesus came to save. It's cool. I'll do the condemning part. You know, no. So the reason why I pull this text out right now is not just because it's the token Christian text, but because John 3:16 and 17 and these verses absolutely set the scene for what Jesus is about to do in chapter 4. Because up until this point, he has just gone to Jewish people. Up until this point, he's only gone to his own people, of his own religious background, and his own country. But then he goes to Samaria. And the text says he had to travel through Samaria. In other words, he made himself walk through Samaria because he knew that people needed to hear the gospel. And he goes and meets this Samaritan woman at the well. And he shares with her, hey, look, I know everything about your life. She comes to believe that he is the Messiah. She's the first one that Jesus reveals that he's the Messiah to. She goes back. She's the first missionary. She runs back and tells her whole town. Jesus stays in the Samaritan village for days, healing people and teaching people. And this whole Samaritan village, tons of them come to accept Jesus as the Messiah. It's absolutely revolutionary. And then in chapter 4, Jesus goes one step further away from his people. See, because in Jesus' day, the Samaritans were sort of like half-breeds. They were sort of like, okay, you're half Jewish, but also you were invaded by the Assyrians, and so you've got some pagan influence, and you don't accept all the books we accept, and you're sort of Jewish, but you're sort of not. Now, in John chapter 4, the story right after that, Jesus goes deeper into the world. So the reason why I bring up John 3:16, it says, for God so loved the world. And so what John is doing now is organizing his gospel to show you that Jesus is going deeper and deeper and deeper into the world. And even, like, he goes to his own people for sure. There will be a whole festival scene that will come up after this. He'll go back to Jerusalem and go back to his own people. But John wants to show you that Jesus didn't only care about his own people, but he cared about the world. So let's get into the text this morning. It's John chapter 4, verses 43 through 54. And let's get into that. After the 2 days, he left for Galilee. Now, Jesus himself had pointed out that a prophet has no honor in his home country. When he arrived in Galilee, the Galileans welcomed him. They had seen all that he had done in Jerusalem at the Passover festival, for they had also been there. Once more, he visited Cana in Galilee, where he had turned the water into wine. And there was a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went to him and begged him to come and to heal his son, who was close to death. Unless you people see signs and wonders, Jesus told him, you will never believe. The royal official said, Sir, come down before my child dies. Go, Jesus replied, your son will live. The man took Jesus at his word and departed. While he was still on the way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said, yesterday at 1 p.m, the fever left him. Then the father realized that this was the exact time which Jesus had said to him, your son will live. So he and his whole household believed. This was the second sign Jesus performed after coming from Judea to Galilee. This is a text that is really amazing. I just want to point out a few things. One, people knew who Jesus was. At this point, Jesus had a reputation. Remember, he's back up in Cana now. That's what the text says. Cana is the place where he turned water into wine. Cana is the hometown of his disciple Nathanael. That's the hometown of Nathanael. So this happens in Cana, where the first sign was. And what the gospel author is trying to do is to try and say, don't forget that first sign. Don't forget the water into wine. That turns out to play a really big part in this text here today. And I'll talk a little bit about that and compare the two and talk about that. But in the book of John, there's only 3 healings. It's really interesting. Every other gospel you read, there's healings everywhere. It's like a demon-possessed person runs up and poof, bam, you're healed. And other people come up and Jesus is like, all right, you're healed. And they're like, oh, you've been bleeding 12 years, all right, you're healed. It's like healing everywhere. But in the Gospel of John, there's only 3. And I think what probably happened is the date of authorship of John is much later. And John saw all those healings and says, okay, great, those are covered. I'm going to give 3 of the healings that I witnessed, that I saw, that I was a part of. that will show you the whole scope of what Jesus is trying to do with healings, and then show much more on top of that. And so there's only 3 healings in the Gospel of John, so these turn out to be really, really significant. And the text actually says that this is Jesus' second sign. So his first sign, and John organizes his gospel. Sorry, there's so much like John organizes his gospel talk and literary structure talk. I'm sure I sound like an English teacher or something like that. But the way that John organizes his gospel, though, is to preach something. So he does 7 signs in his gospel. And does Jesus do more than 7 miracles? Yes, of course. At the very end of the Gospel of John that we read last week, John actually wrote, Jesus did so many other things that all the books in the world couldn't contain them. So these 7 ones are curated samples of what Jesus did to show you something even greater. And we're going to get into that a little bit today. So this text starts off by saying, after 2 days. And I know that it seems like that phrase just is a transitionary piece. It's not really important. It doesn't really matter. It actually does matter. These are what John will use as a number of things called saddle texts. And what he'll want to do literarily is link other stories together. So he's trying to tell us, don't just read this story isolated on its own, but remember what happened in Cana. Remember what came just before this. Don't forget that you're reading this text in a larger context. It says he goes back to Cana. So John is teaching his reader, John is teaching us the way that he's layering his text. And he's telling us these signs are important. Why? Because I'm revealing who Jesus is, and I don't want you to miss it. He's basically saying, pay attention. We're going to go deeper than we went at Cana. We're going to take it to the next level, so I want you to pay attention. When you read the Bible regularly, you begin to see these little cues pop up. Just this little phrase, after this, it sort of seems like it means nothing. He went to Cana. Wait a second, we've been to Cana before. So let's get into the rest of the story. I know there's a lot of literary stuff, but let's get into the story again. Once more, he visited Cana in Galilee. This is verses 46 and 7. And he had stayed where he had turned the water into wine, where a certain royal official whose son lay sick at Capernaum. When this man heard that Jesus had arrived in Galilee from Judea, he went and begged him to come to heal his son who was close to death. So once more he visited Cana, and again, this story is floating around Cana. They had all these jars of that were meant for ceremonial washing, and all of a sudden Jesus takes it and fills them with water, and the servants pull out wine. It's a story that probably went around the entire town by this point. Jesus' disciple Nathanael is from Cana. And so this is probably what prompts this royal official to come and talk to Jesus. Now, we don't know exactly who this royal official is. In the Gospel of Luke, there's a very similar story, and it's a Roman centurion. It's a Roman. Now, the phrase royal official here probably denotes a Roman. And this is the point that John is trying to make. Again, let's go backwards here. Jesus starts his ministry. He's going to Jewish people. He goes to a Jewish festival. He goes to a Jewish wedding. And then, for God so loved the world, bam, he's off in Samaria. Bam, he's going back off into Cana to meet this royal official. Jesus' ministry is now expanding outside of the influence of just the Jewish people. So it's likely, more than likely, a Roman official. And here's what I love about this scene. There's a progression to what was written before. John's first sign is at a Jewish wedding. He goes to Jerusalem. He has these conversations during the Passover. He's revealing that he's the new temple. Then he talks with Israel's teacher and all this stuff. And then, for God so loved the world. And then he's now with this Roman guy. What this whole story is preaching kind of comes back to right after John 3:16. His disciples say this. They came to John and said to him, "Rabbi, That man who was talking with you on the other side of the Jordan, the one you testified, he's baptizing and everyone's going to him. The story is now coming full circle. Everyone now is coming to Jesus. Even Roman officials are now coming to Jesus. Jesus is doing things that people don't understand, and so now they're all coming to him. It all preaches, all of these stories together, John is pointing back to John 3:16. And if you've got your notes, the very first note is the love of Jesus is for everyone. That is simply what this is preaching. It's not just for those who are around Jesus, his disciples. It's not just for the Jewish people. It's not just for his friends at Cana at the wedding. It's not just for that. But now he's going after like even Roman officials. And if you're a good Jewish person at Jesus' day, you're like, what is this guy doing? Why is he going through Samaria? Doesn't he know that Samaria is unclean? Why is he even speaking to a Roman official? Doesn't he know that those Romans are oppressors? But Jesus doesn't fall neatly into anybody's politic of the time. Because had Jesus been in one camp or the other, maybe the political camp of the Zealots, he would have been compelled to stab that Roman official and kill him. Because that's what the Zealots did. They didn't like Romans. And they said, they're our oppressor. And so the way we're going to deal with our oppressor is that we're going to kill him. Had Jesus fallen neatly into somebody else's political ideal, that's what Jesus would have had to do. But Jesus is completely other. He falls outside of your political ideal and my political ideal because he is God. And so he doesn't fall neatly into somebody's political ideal. Do you smell what I'm stepping in? The love of Jesus is for everyone. It doesn't matter that good Jewish rabbis didn't associate with Romans. Jesus did because he's God. It didn't matter that good Jewish rabbis don't associate with Samaritans. Jesus did because he's God. Jesus doesn't function on our terms or our rules. He functions on the rule of love. That's what I love about Jesus. So many times we come to Jesus and we proof text him and say, no, see, Jesus would be on my side. He would fall neatly into my rules. Jesus would do what I did, right? And the moment you do that, you should feel really convicted because you're not God, right? I'm going to tell you, just even loving people is difficult for all of us, right? I will tell you about a story one time. Whenever we have homeless people roam through the church campus, we kind of have this policy. We always try and give them a little bit of food, a little bit of coffee, something like that, talk with them through their day, and help them find the resource that they really need. Because camping out on our property is not good for them. It's not good for our neighbors call us and get mad and stuff like that. And we really want to care for them, but we want the best for them. So we had a guy come in one day, it was rainy, called 211. 211's great. They help you get all connected and stuff like that. Found this guy in a shelter, found him everything that he needed, even got him the bus tickets that he needed to go to this shelter. And he and I were sitting out here talking, and he had this cup of coffee that I'd given him, and we had just done our roof tiles out there, which are a little bit messed up now because we still have this one leak. It's not Bob Pulis' fault. Don't worry. It's a flat roof. So anyways, we're sitting out there, we're talking, and this guy says to me, I'm going to sleep here tonight in your building. And I was like, I'm sorry, you're not doing that. You actually have to be regulated to be a shelter. There's a number of things. You have to have showers. There's a whole bunch of things that you would need to have. You can't sleep here tonight. This is not a shelter. But look, we found you a shelter, one, and two, we got you a bus ticket. It's free. You could just go there right now. There's a bus stop right here. I'll tell you exactly when to go. You could go. And he gets all mad, and he takes this coffee, and he just throws it. And he hits all of our new roof tiles, and I'm just like, oh, it's going to leave a coffee stain. I saw the bill on those roof tiles. I know how much they were. And then this guy gets up and leaves and stuff like that. And I was just had a hard time loving this guy. And I'm like, oh, he threw his cup. Who does that? got all over my new roof tiles and stuff. And I was just sort of like standing there in the moment when God convicted me and was like, you mean he threw coffee at my building? And I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, God, aren't you mad? He threw coffee at your building. And he's like, your job is to love him, not to condemn him. And it was like, that's right. You just learn that lesson over and over and over again. And the guy's a difficult guy to love. He was a really yelly guy. He liked to yell. That guy yells. But anyways, my point, though, is the point that I was making before. The love of Jesus is for everyone. Why do I withhold it just for certain folks sometimes? Why do you withhold it just for certain folks sometimes? Why doesn't the love of Jesus traverse across every boundary in our lives? But sometimes it's like, ooh, I don't want to keep the love of Jesus over here in this back pocket so that person doesn't get it. The love of Jesus is for everyone. So a Roman official comes to Jesus, a Roman official whose country is responsible for 80% tax on Jewish people. His country is responsible for the disappearance of people. It's responsible for over 20,000 crucifixions in Jesus' day. It's responsible for systematically brutalizing people. They did a couple cool things, the roads, the infrastructure, the water, the aqueducts. They did some cool things. But man, this country, Rome, was really bad for the Jews, and Jesus had an audience with this Roman official. It would have just been, it's like political suicide for Jesus. And yet, for God so loved the world that he gave his only son. The simple truth is that Jesus loved this man. So I want to talk about this story, parallels water and wine and all that stuff. So let's jump into verse 48. Jesus says this, and you might think that this is a rebuke to the man who came and asked the question. But actually, this is a rebuke to the whole city. Because likely there's this audience surrounding Jesus. At this point, wherever Jesus goes, there's a little crowd around Jesus. And Jesus says, unless you people, plural, he's talking to the whole audience, see signs and wonders, Jesus told them, you will never believe. So if you remember the water to wine story, Jesus' mom came up to him and was like, Jesus, they ran out of wine. And Jesus rebukes her. He says, woman, why do you involve me? My time has not yet come. This is like the same exact structure. Now he's rebuking a town. Somebody comes to him with a request and he rebukes the town. A town that has known about Jesus' signs and wonders because he just turned water into wine and they were all there for it. So now he says, unless you, plural, see signs and wonders, you will never believe. So why does Jesus say this? Because the sign in Jesus' gospel always points to something, and it points to Jesus. What I think Jesus is saying here is, look, don't chase after the miraculous. Chase after me, the one who does the miraculous. Do I believe that Jesus still does miraculous things today? Yep. Do I believe he still heals people today? Yep, absolutely. Do I still believe he does all those things? Yep. But the problem is that we could turn into a society who worships the signs and wonders rather than worships the one who does them. And that's why we have to go after Jesus. And this is why Jesus said that. You're all looking for signs and wonders. The signs and wonders are just supposed to point to all who Jesus is. In John's gospel, genuine faith is not built on miracles, but is built on a declaration and a decision as to who Jesus is. If the man had been toying with the view of Jesus as a wonder-working, cure-all magician, Jesus stopped immediately that pattern of thinking. So let's look at the royal official's reply. Verse 49 and 50. The royal official said, "Sir, come down before my child dies." "Go," Jesus replied, "your son will live." The man took Jesus at his word and departed. The man did not care about Jesus' past miracles. He cared about his son. And what's happening here is an enacted prayer. Like, I want you to visualize this scene for a second. A man comes to Jesus and says, "Sir, I just want my son to live." This is what it looks like every time you pray. You're going to Jesus and saying, "Jesus, this is what I'm asking for. This is what I want." And then Jesus says, "Go, your son will live." And the man takes Jesus at his word. The royal official is not interested in Christology, fulfilled prophecy, or even signs and wonders. He's interested in the well-being of his own child. And this is his urgent prayer for help, and it wins Jesus over. The man accepts Jesus' word and departs, thus demonstrating that he's unlike most Galileans, that he's not just demanding a sign and wonder. He's not staying there until Jesus pulls a bunny out of a hat or something. Like, he said, "Your son is healed." He knows this guy turned water into wine, so he's like, "I'm good with that." And he just left. He believed and he left. I love that because not only because John is linking some stories. There's another story. Mary says, this back to water and the wine story. Mary tells the people, "Do whatever he tells you." And here in this story, the man takes Jesus at his word. He's doing whatever Jesus tells him to do. I love that. The linking between these two stories is incredible. The man takes Jesus at his word and he departed. The man obeyed the word of Jesus without seeing a sign. In the ancient world, miracles and acts of power were linked to the presence of a miracle worker. But here, the healer refuses to be present. What Jesus is saying is, look, I know there's a whole bunch of people out there. In fact, we know even in the Old Testament that there's these people who were miracle workers out there because when Pharaoh had all these things happening, his magicians, enchanters, and sorcerers were like, look, we could perform the same party trick. That's nothing. We could do the same thing. So we know there's magicians and types of people out there, but it's all linked geographically. They all have to be in the same place for it to happen. But now, Jesus heals this young man over a distance. And I have a question for us. And the question is in your next note here. It's, do I take Jesus at his word or do I demand proof? Do I take Jesus at his word or do I demand proof? And some of you are here, you're like, I don't know that I've ever heard Jesus speak to me before. And that's okay. It's been conveniently written down in this book that you have, in this text. It's just real utterly convenient, and it's been printed in like every language in the world, and it's available for free download on any like Bible app or anything like that. Do I take Jesus at his word? Do I know Jesus' word in my life? Do I read the text and just take Jesus for what it says? This is what this section is asking. It's to remember back to Cana when Mary told the servants, do whatever he tells you. Take Jesus at his word. Or are you like a great many people who will never do that but demand proof and demand proof and demand proof? I ask that question because a lot of times I'm that guy. Jesus deals with both people. There's another story that happens after the resurrection. It goes like this. John chapter 20, verse 25. So the other disciples have said, we've seen the Lord. But he said to them, this is Thomas, unless I see the nail marks in his hands and put my finger where the nails were and put my hand in the side, I will not believe. Unless I see. I will not put my faith in something I cannot see. So Jesus shows up to the party for Thomas. And what I love about this is that immediately when Jesus shows up, you don't see Thomas like walking around and be like, all right, Jesus, hands up, poking around and, stuff like that. This is what you see. Then he said to Thomas, Put your fingers here. Jesus invites him to. Put your fingers here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it on my side. Stop doubting and believe. Thomas said to him, my Lord and my God, one of the great declarations of all Scripture. Then Jesus told him, because you've seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. This Roman official was one of those men who had not seen and yet believed. He just took Jesus at his word. I understand it's hard to take Jesus at his word. Seeing absolutely helps. But I think that Jesus knows that when you come to believe based on miracles, then you will always chase after the next one in order to sustain your faith. But when you take Jesus at his word, when you read the words of Jesus and believe them, then God truly does miraculous things and changes the inner being of your life. Let's read the rest of this text. Verses 51 through 54. While he was still on the way, his servants met him with the news that his boy was living. When he inquired as to the time when his son got better, they said to him, yesterday at 1 p.m, the fever left him. Then the father realized that this was the exact time at which Jesus had said to them, your son will live. So he and his whole household came to believe. They believed. This was the second sign Jesus performed after coming from Judea to Galilee. I love this. After taking Jesus at his word, the royal official just leaves. He goes home, displaying this amazing faith. Well, this guy, I know he's somebody. I know that he turned water into wine, so I know that he could heal my son. So I prayed, I walked up to him and asked him, I'm just going to go home. That's faith. It's a Roman official, by the way, who's displaying, and this would be not couth to say in Jewish circles, he's displaying the same kind of faith as Abraham. When Abraham said, God said to Abraham, go to the place I'll show you. Without hearing the rest of it, Abraham picks up his family and he's out. He goes. This is displaying this amazing faith he did not see. He didn't have the miracle at hand. And he just goes. It sort of begs the question, and I think the question arises, what do you need to put your faith in Jesus? What do you need to trust in Jesus? What do you need to go deeper with Jesus? Is his word enough, or is it like, no, I need something deeper? For Thomas, he's a signs and wonders guy. He needed the whole show. But is the word of Jesus enough? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. Lastly, John points out that this was the second sign that Jesus performed. One of the things that you're going to see in the Gospel of John is written sort of in cycles. This is called the Cana cycle. This ends the Cana cycle because it starts in chapter 2 where Jesus does the miracle at Cana, and then it ends with him doing another miracle, another sign at Cana. And everything in between is all linked. It all matters. And next week, we're going to go into the festival cycle, where we're going to look at a number of chapters of Jesus being at all these different festivals and why they all matter. You're going to learn a ton about Jewish festivals. Aren't you glad? Aren't you excited? John is writing this all because he's trying to tell you what he's doing. He's echoing this motif of new creation over and over and over again. In fact, that's what the signs in the Gospel of John are all about. The signs in the Gospel of John are all about Jesus reversing the curse of Eden. In the Garden of Eden, when humanity sinned and fell from God, God cursed. He didn't say a curse word. He cursed human beings. He cursed the ground. He cursed the serpent. He cursed it all. And we live under the effects of that curse. And what Jesus is doing is he's reversing the curse in himself. And so you get this whole idea of like water into wine, joy is restored, healing of the official son, life over death or life over distance. Then there's the next story we're going to look at tomorrow. Tomorrow's not Sunday. We're going to look at next week, healing of the lame man, and it's this restoration of the body. Then there's the feeding of 5,000. This is the abundance in Eden. Walking on water, chaos subdued. God's, this incredible Genesis imagery. Healing the blind man, light over darkness. Raising Lazarus from the dead, ultimate reversal of death. Like these 7 signs show us that in Jesus, he's truly offering us this new creation life where he could reverse the effects of sin and death. And it's over and over again. The last fill-in for your notes today is the signs show us a whole new world has begun in Jesus. And when you take Jesus at his word, when you believe, that whole new world can become present in you. It can become reality in your life. So I end with the question, really. What will it take to believe? Will you believe? Not after you see more, not after you've got proof, but right now, do you take Jesus at his word? The official didn't get evidence first. I love that. This official wasn't like, all right, let me send the messenger and see if my son's really well before I make this 1.5-day long journey on foot back down into Galilee, or to Capernaum. He didn't seek evidence first. He just went. He just got it. All he got was, your son will live, and that was enough for him. The text says, the man took Jesus at his word and departed. That's faith. That's living faith. He walked away with nothing but the word of Jesus, and the miracle he never even saw happened. Some of you are waiting to see. And Jesus is saying, believe, and then you'll see. So here it is. When Jesus says you're forgiven, believe him. When he says you are loved, believe him. When he says you could be made new, believe him. You don't need another sign. You have his word. So I guess the question right now is, and I'm going to invite the band to come up because we're going to end here in just a second. Will you believe? Will you just simply tell him, like, even right here where you're at, Jesus, I believe. I believe that you are the Son of God. I believe that you died on the cross for me. I believe you want a relationship with me. And I believe that you could take the sin in my life as far away from the east as to the west. I believe you could heal me, God. I believe you could change me. I believe you can make me new. I believe. Will you tell Jesus, I trust you, I'm all in? Because I think what Jesus might want to speak into your life is go and you will live. So I want to invite us to prayer this morning. Just take a couple of minutes, like during this next song right here where we're at. We've got these yellow yes cards that are in the back of all your seat pockets. And if you're here today and you're like, I believe. I want to make a declaration that I believe in Jesus. I want to invite you to pull out one of those yellow yes cards, fill it out, and throw it in one of our offering boxes at the end of the service. And you'll have a pastor contact you, and we'll follow up with you about that. I believe it's just so important. I want to invite us to pray right now. Let's do that. Lord Jesus, I just thank you. God, I thank you that we could take you at your word, that your word is powerful, that is trustworthy. And God, we know that your word says that you love every single person in this room. God, I believe there's some folks here today who's been holding out, who simply need to say yes to you for the first time, who simply need to say, Lord, I believe. Maybe there's some here who need to say, Lord, I believe, help me with my unbelief. And maybe there's some here today who are like, Lord, I want to believe, but I'm Thomas. I need to put my hands somewhere. I need to see, I need to feel, because I'm just filled with doubt. Lord Jesus, would you be with those people today who are praying that prayer? And God, would you speak to them? Reveal to them how much you love them. And Father, for those today who simply want to say, God, I'll take you at your word. I believe. God, I pray that you would do an incredible thing in their lives, that you would come and live with them, and that your presence would be with them all the days of their lives. Father, the power of the Holy Spirit would be palpable in their lives, and that you would change